Hi, and welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. My name is Garhen, and today we have a surprise live edition. We're going to be talking about human nature, actually. And we're just going to go back to full screen mode here since we don't need to worry about having any graphics today. And we're going to talk about human nature. And this is an interesting subject that Debbie had brought up. And we had talked a little bit about it during our live help session last night, the 6 p.m. Wednesday, March 28th session. And that is on our Help Awaken YouTube page. And again, to remind everybody that we are live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on our Help Awaken YouTube channel, and that is open for help and advice in any of life issues that you may be experiencing. Other than that, we have another live session, and that is the Sunday 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Q&A. And that is a live Sunday talk, and that is available through our Awaken the World YouTube channel. The links to those can be found within the group, and I will also attach a transparency to this video at the end after it's produced into YouTube with links to get there as well. So, human nature. There's a lot of talk about human nature, and this is actually kind of an interesting subject. You know, there's been a lot of opinions. Seneca, for exactly, he was a Roman statesman and philosopher and apologist right around the time of Christ. He was born in 4 BC. And his idea was that a human is a clean and elegant, what did he say? A clean and elegant animal by its nature. Now, that's really funny. My wife and I have an office cleaning contract that we do 3 times a week. And I can tell you that human beings, especially in the men's bathroom, are far from being clean and elegant by their nature. It's actually really sad. Albert Einstein, he said of human nature that 2 things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. And, you know, if we look at Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man or woman's life enough sorrow and suffering to disarm all hostility. Now this begins to sound like we're coming closer to some truth, doesn't it? You know, the funny thing about human nature is that everyone would like to take human nature and box it up, you know, a little square. This is what human nature is. Or perhaps this is human nature. Or maybe human nature is this. I mean, if you are from a Christian background of any sort, this is human nature. This is your essential nature. You're evil in some way. That is an impossibility. It's not true. Our human nature is neither good nor bad. It simply is. And what we make of it is what really matters. Ah, I see that Jackie's here. Good morning, Jackie. Nice to see you. So we're talking about human nature, and we're talking about that what human nature actually is something that only we can define for ourselves. We, as individuated shards of that singular consciousness, that sea of consciousness, manifested into a physical identity for a short period of time. It is us who decides what it is to be human. It is us as individuals that begin the process of what it means to be a human being. And we talked about human beings and human doings in an earlier video, okay? And that's worth taking a look at because there's a big difference. Certainly, it would seem that our base nature has a few common characteristics, though. And those base nature characteristics have nothing to do with concepts of good or evil. Our being is not an evil being by birth. It is not. As a matter of fact, there's no such thing as an evil being. Evil is a definition we place on things, depending on the circumstances, the society, and how we happen to feel about it. Now, we could all look at Hitler and say, well, Hitler was an evil man. He killed 6 million Jews. I would ask you this: which was more evil then? The fact that Hitler hated Jews that much? Or the fact that everyone he asked to kill Jews on his behalf went ahead and did it? You see, when we begin to think a little bit deeper, we understand that what Hitler was actually doing was showing humanity a face of itself. Hitler hated Jews. His stated goal was to do Christianity a favor and wipe Jews off of the planet. Ah, Jackie is here as well. And oh, sorry, Jackie, you're still here. And Janet. There's a lot of JAs. So, we're talking about Hitler. Hitler showed humanity part of its own nature. And that is the never-ending shame that you can still feel if you travel to Germany today and try to bring the subject up. See, it isn't Hitler, as a mass murderer, Hitler may have killed 100 or 200 Jews before he would have been caught and imprisoned. At the very most. The 6 million Jews were not killed by Hitler. The 6 million Jews were killed by the people who followed Hitler. As a matter of fact, I would challenge you to find a single piece of history that involves him personally killing anybody. Now, is it our nature to blindly follow? Is it our nature to simply listen to someone else and do what they tell us to do without thought? You might think so. I have spent many years in advocacy of the homeless and the poor and the disenfranchised and senior citizens. I have advocated in the courtrooms, in the Supreme Court here in Canada, and also in the criminal courts. And, I got to tell you, the number of people who hide behind, well, it's just policy, is incredible. Those same people who would hide behind it's just policy as an answer to why they cannot serve a human being, why the human being's needs are not paramount over top the policy, those are the type of people who Hitler relied on to go out there and implement his policies blindly, knowing they would hide behind those policies. Janet brings up Manson, and yes, as I mentioned during the video on cults and religion, that indeed Manson is a prime example of a mass murderer who was only able to murder a limited few in comparison before being caught. Or taking your own life, depending on who you were, where and within the cult. There were a number that actually committed suicide, I do believe. That was back in the 60s. I was born in 1960, so I was quite young when it all came down. At the very end of the 60s, I believe the Hollywood murders were in 71. I think it was about 11 at the time, so 10 or 11 years old. So again, is human nature this desire to simply follow and do whatever we're told to do? And of course, the answer to that is also no. There is no real singular characteristic that can apply to all of us as far as our definition of human nature goes, except those that occur when we do not think. When we are not entrenched in our ego, when we are not thinking in our head, we do not act to preserve ourselves. We act to preserve that which we see is in need of preservation. Case in point, a person who does not swim will not hesitate in thought to throw themselves into a river to try and save a drowning child. Now, if they sat and thought about it for a while, one, the child would be probably gone, but they may think differently. But at our core, at the center of our being, when we are not lost in our egoic mind, we are not one to preserve our own life over another. We are one to give our own life for another. And why do we do that outside of thought? Because our higher being, our higher selves, knows there is no loss in the sacrifice. Human nature is not egoic nature. And that's where the real definition has to be made, okay? Human nature has nothing to do with ego. It has nothing to do with thought. As much as all these quotes, and I have a few more to read, and they do bring things to mind to think about. One of them is from C. Joy Bell C. I find it odd, the greed of mankind. People only like you for as long as they perceive they can get what they want from you. Or for as long as they perceive that you are who they want you to be. Does this sound familiar? But I like people for all their changing surprises, the thoughts in their heads, the warmth that changes to cold, and the cold that changes to warmth. The rawness of being human delights me. Carl Sagan, for me, the most ironic token of the first human moon landing is the plaque signed by President Richard Nixon that Apollo 11 took to the moon says, "We came in peace for all mankind." And as the United States was dropping 7.5 megatons of conventional explosives on small nations in Southeastern Asia, we congratulated ourselves on our humanity. We would harm no one on this lifeless rock, the moon. Carl Sagan. Our points of view are always tied up in those thought processes, and those thought processes are not indicative of human nature. Human nature, let's pull that apart for a second. Human, our manifestation and the label we give ourselves in the physical realm. Nature, the sea of consciousness, that which is naturally occurring, that which is the real. What is real about our nature? Well, what is real about our nature has nothing to do with your concept of yourself. You know, time and time again, the Bible would have us believe that human beings are bad creatures from birth, that we are incomplete, not whole, not perfect, and sinners and in need of being saved for something that apparently one of our ancestors did thousands of years ago. This is power and control. It is so easy to look around you and see the news and see how other people are behaving. I see it every day, even in the small 10-unit strata that we look after the grounds for. The amount of garbage and cigarette butts and mess that people just make casually, carelessly. Is that human nature? No. That is unconscious ego nature. And we must differentiate between the two. I know this has been a short live session, but wanted to stop in and touch base with everyone today. Much love. Namaste. There'll be another video release coming out tomorrow. And as always, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.